for joining us for another edition of the interview on Africa 24 TV. Today's guest is Honourable David Mnangagwa. He is the Deputy Minister of Finance and Investment Promotion of Zimbabwe. Welcome on set.
Thank you for having me, Ruth.
Can you tell us the current economic policies put in place to promote investment and economic growth in Zimbabwe?
Thanks for that question. Since the inception of the Second Republic, this is when His Excellency Comrade Dr. E.D. Mnangagwa came into power. The first mantra he came with was Zimbabwe is open for business, which sets the tone really for what would be the next 5 years of his first term, which he successfully got another mandate in the August election. Key policies that were put into place was one, contentious repealing of an indigenization clause that required 51% of local ownership in any businesses. I think that section in the law was repealed. This allowed an investor to actually come in, put in full funding and have full ownership of whatever venture they were trying to get into, particularly in the resource industry. We've seen the successful setting up of ZIDA, which is the Zimbabwe Investment Development Agency, which is a one-stop shop for investors to come, register their companies, get all the regulatory approvals that they might need, and also have access to a laundry list of available projects, processes, and avoid the bureaucracy of having to move around between government departments. Now, in addition to that, there's also been something that is quite important, might not be on paper, but it's a mindset change. You see, the mantra Zimbabwe is open for business is a message to the whole country, be it government, be it private sector, and all players to have an environment that is conducive to do business in the productive sector, in the financial sector. So you'll find that all the policies that have been put in place are pro-business more than ever before in the history of our country.
You took part in the 2023 edition of the Africa Investment Forum. Can you tell us how your participation in such a forum is important for your country?
So the AIF, the Africa Investment Forum, has been a very important platform for us. And I'll explain why in two aspects. Firstly, we have a lot of the African development partners here. We've had very successful meetings with AFDB, Africa 50, your AFC, DBSA. For us, these are institutions that are very close to our heart as Zimbabwe, because these are African institutions with a Pan-African view. And what I'm glad mostly is that we are reaching a point where as Africans we can collaborate, finance, and cut across borders using our own very institutions to support each other. That for me is a very important leap that is going to help Africa become more empowered. The second part to our involvement and participation here is that they also have private boardroom sessions where your private investors from the various investors and promoters from various countries listen to project pitches. We, as the government of Zimbabwe, actually came here to support one of our own who had a very fruitful and I would want to say successful private boardroom engagement where we gave our support and our commitment to support. Again, this goes to your earlier question as to how are we as government supporting a conducive environment. So we're here to push the government's narrative, but at the same time to support the private sector as well.
Strengthening partnerships between African countries and international investors.
I think, like I alluded to in my previous statement, the very fact that you have your developmental institutions, your investors, and government all in the same room and having both official and unofficial meetings and getting to understand each other is quite an important step. what has been important, especially for Zimbabwe, was giving perspective to the perception issues. You'll find that for every different African country, there'll be certain perception issues surrounding a lot of issues. I mean, it's unique to each country. But what this platform does is it then gives perspective as to those perceptions. So this is quite an important forum in allowing that mix between your international investors, your African governments, and our developmental institutions to understand each other, all in the same room.
Africa has a huge potential in terms of natural resources, and Zimbabwe is also endowed with key minerals such as lithium or platinum. And these resources are essential for the production of electric vehicles, for example. How can you take advantage, of this forum to leverage or unlock financial revenue?
Okay. The first part is alerting people as to the opportunity. Zimbabwe is probably going to be the largest lithium producer in the world. We're already one of the leading platinum or PGM producers in the world. So the first thing is for the rest of Africa to know that, hey, this is what's going on in Zimbabwe. There are investors who've been faster and have been first movers and have already come. But still, there's enough out there. Now, the next opportunity in this that has not been exploited is the beneficiation of such minerals. Would like to see more African countries coming together, put up your processing plants, your beneficiation, and let's manufacture our own batteries as Africans and be consumers of our own products. So the information sharing, the knowledge platforms that we have are extremely important in marketing our own products so that we don't have, a transatlantic export of our raw material that then comes back as a finished product. I think we can go from A to Z within Africa. So the knowledge exchange and the marketing is quite key and essential for that to happen.
Small and medium-sized enterprises have proven to contribute to the growth of Africa. So how is Zimbabwe investing in these SMEs?
So the SME sector is actually quite a huge section in our economy, and I'm sure in most African economies. You find that where there's a huge informal sector, most of those will be SMEs, which constitute your youth and your women, which are your more marginalized groups. I represent a youthful constituency, so it's an area that I'm passionate about and actually have to have active participation. The first thing that we have is financial inclusion. What you want to do is um, you want to give youth and women and all SME participants um, access to platforms to access financing. Now, this is a bit tricky in a situation where you have a blend between a cash economy and somewhat unconventional banking within the SME. So we are taking an active effort to fund some of the SME banks. We have a women's bank, we've got a youth bank that can become a platform for spurring growth. There's the infrastructure development, which will allow the SMEs to have decent spaces to operate from. This then leads to the formalization and inclusion within the formal economy. It's very easy for an SME to operate and participate outside of the economy because there's no infrastructure to support that. So this is an area that government is keen on making sure that the necessary infrastructure is available to make sure that they can participate formally. And henceforth, we can also collect taxes as government. Um, but apart from just collecting the taxes, they then have access to financing because they're formalized. So there's that moral persuasion to become formal so that they can actually grow bigger. So these are some of the efforts that we're taking.
Cooperation is important for Africa's growth. So, how is your country collaborating with other African nations to create a conducive environment for investment and foster regional development?
We have our traditional relationships in SADC. When I'm talking about SADC, this is the Southern African Development Community. Um, we have a whole host of trade agreements, but you'll find that over the years, relations have opened up with countries that we traditionally might not have had strong relations with. I'll give Rwanda, for example. I think that corridor has been opened, and you'll find that there's a lot more cooperation of both government and private business people. Um, our Zimbabwe is open for business mantra was not exclusive just to across the continent, but I would say first right of refusal was to African countries. So you will find that there's a whole mix. You look for any nationality, you'll find them in Zimbabwe, and they're doing business. So I would say through that we've opened up the country to allow anybody to come and do business. Obviously, within the laws of the country, but it's open for business. We're very welcome and inviting to Africans.
Honourable David Mnangagwa, Deputy Minister of Finance and Investment Promotion of Zimbabwe, it was a pleasure having you here.
Thank you, Ruth. I appreciate it.
Dear viewers, thank you for staying with us. Stay tuned for more programs on Africa 24.